Hello and welcome to Teenagers Untangled, the audio hug for parents going through the teenage years. I'm Rachel Richards, parenting coach, journalist, mother of 2 teenagers and 2 bonus daughters. Now, I've had a terrific email from Katie who says, I really love your podcast and have recommended it at least 10 times to fellow parents. Katie, thank you so much. I don't have a marketing budget, so all of the growth comes from your generosity. She carries on. It has given me understanding, patience, tools, calmness. I feel much better equipped and my relationship with my kids is just deepening. I also dread the teenage years much less, even though I'm already melancholic about them not needing me in the same way. Funnily, I have become an addict to the podcast, even though my kids are not even 11 yet. But everything you do with being connected helps at every stage. And I wish I would have had that same knowledge and calm when they were even smaller. So thank you for all that wonderful research and input. Katie, I feel the same way. I mean, I wish I'd understood this stuff when my kids were little. Anyway, Katie went on to say that she had the impression that most of the interviewees come from the United States or from the UK and all had broadly similar views on success and functioning in our capitalist society. Sometimes she wishes I'd also find people from Sri Lanka, Nigeria, Vietnam to broaden the very Anglo-Saxon view. Katie, that's a really good point. I think the reason I tend to get Anglo-Saxon interviewees is because those are the books I'm reading and because they're in English, but I really like your suggestion. When I was a parent gym coach in inner city London, most of my parents were from different cultures and I absolutely loved working with them. The Nigerian mums have a very different approach and being in England felt quite challenging to them. So I'm going to dig around and see what I can find. I think it can be incredibly useful because when we are immersed in our own specific culture, it can have a very powerful impact on the way we see things. But that doesn't mean to say it's right. And it can really help to hear other ways of doing things so we can make informed decisions. With that in mind, my guest today is the Gen Z podcaster known as Amma Browngirl. Amma grew up in England, but she's from an immigrant family. Her parents spoke Punjabi at home, and they only learnt English as she grew up. Her podcast is aimed at opening up conversations about all of the things her community don't discuss, so it's absolutely fascinating. I met her at a podcast show last year and loved her black sheep energy and honesty about the way she's been parented. So I thought, look, we parents could always learn from something like this and hearing her views. Now, Amma identifies herself as Desi. So I started out by asking her what Desi means.
Do you know what? Just before I explain that, I really like that I have a white girl asking me this because I'm like, wow, we love teaching, we love educating.
I love learning.
This is a word that I've just grown up using, and it's a way to describe someone who is, I guess, South Asian, who takes part in a lot of Desi culture or like Indian culture. But Desi isn't specific just to Indian. Desi could be Bangladesh, Pakistan, like whoever really. But Desi can be Desi food or Desi festivals. It's just a way of saying our culture, Desi culture, okay. South Asian culture.
That's really helpful. So your parents, were they first generation immigrants to the UK?
Yeah, so my dad moved here first and then my mum, they got married and then he brought her over here and then they just had me and my brother. So yeah.
And did you speak a language other than English in your home?
Yes. So I spoke Punjabi until I was 5. I think. And then I think I was going to school as well, but I would still speak Punjabi at school. And I really struggled with English for a long time. I mean, I speak English now, fine. But Punjabi is main language at home and I speak that fluently.
Okay. And do your parents, are they comfortable with English?
Yes. I mean, my mum didn't speak English for years, but what my dad used to do, he used to give her like errands to run, but on a piece of paper, he would write, oh, I want to put this check in, but in Punjabi, and he'd make her go to the bank and say that. And then slowly, like, we started going to school, we started teaching her, but now they speak English fine. They just sometimes pretend that they can't because they're just more comfortable with Punjabi, but they speak English fine.
Of course. Of course. So what I'm trying to establish is that, of course, you've got a home there where what they've done is they brought their own culture and their own way of life and their own language to what felt like a foreign country originally. And they slowly transitioned, and of course you were in that first wave of people who were actually sort of taking on some of the Western values. So I wanted to sort of get that out in the open first. So you, as a female growing up in a Desi household, because I've listened to a lot of your podcast episodes, it's a very interesting thing for me to look into, because there was so much focus on your body. Can you talk a bit more about how your culture impacted the way you as a young girl grew up?
Sure. So growing up, I think just start with, in terms of like my height and just my general build, I'm 5'10", so I'm quite tall.
Same as my daughter.
And
yes.
Yeah. So like from it, like even with your daughter, from a young age, people are going to think she's a lot older than she probably is, just because of her height. I was also a little bit chubby as well as a kid. So naturally, like, people just thought, oh, she's much older than she was, but I wasn't. I may have looked like it, but I was still a child. And I think that just unfortunately, with the pressure and the judgment of society, because I was treated a lot older, I at that age, you think, oh, okay, if I'm being treated older, then I must act older. So obviously, having like body image issues was something that started really young. Then also being confused as to, oh, why am I brown? But like all my friends are white, and like, why do I look like this? And then even with my parents, because they were so busy just, living in survival mode, they do not have the time to tell me, oh, you're perfect the way you are, or we love you the way you are, or you are beautiful the way you are. They just didn't have the time. Like, you can ask any Desi parent, they do not have the time to be telling their kids that, especially in that time, like back in the day. Do you know what I mean? So growing up with body image issues was just the standard, really, for me.
And because you talked quite a bit about the sexualization of the body and how women are viewed in your culture. And again, I'm just curious about if you can explain how that is, and then we can talk about how that relates to what you were experiencing in school and different ways of seeing things.
Sure. So I don't know if I can generalize here, but based on my personal experience, when it came to sex specifically and the sexualization of my body, it was very much, oh, okay, she's a grown woman, we can kind of look at her that way. And it's disgusting to say, but that was the truth. And, even hearing some of my friends' stories about how growing up they were very comfortable with their bodies because, for example, they'd see their mum naked, which to me was just mind-blowing, because I've never seen my mum naked. Like,
right.
It's mad. That was utter bonkers to me. So like, to think that I've got friends who have grown up very comfortably with seeing a naked body, and for me, it took me probably 20 years to get comfortable with my body. And before that, I'd see a naked body and think, oh my God, like, no, sex, like, because that's all I knew until I met a good group, until I met a good group of friends, until I educated and healed myself to understand that a naked body does not equal sex. It's just a beautiful naked body, and that is it.
Yeah. So do you think that? So do you think that's quite a cultural thing? Because I think what I'm trying to get at with this interview that I think is so interesting, because I grew up in Africa, moving around all the time. We lived in Spain, and then we came to England, and I felt quite other. Like, I didn't feel very, very English, and yet of course I fit in much more than you would. And I'm just wondering whether this is something that was heightened by the fact that other people around you were talking and behaving maybe differently, or do you feel like that? Because I think there is an old-fashioned way of looking at bodies anyway that and that infused our culture. And I remember growing up in a very sexist, very sort of, people would talk very offensively about girls' bodies. So I just wonder whether that, to what extent you feel like that's very a cultural thing, or whether you think that it's just an overhang from the way we always used to talk about girls' bodies.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's a cultural thing. I mean, anytime I would have an uncle or a man come into the house, and this is including my dad, and I feel very vulnerable sharing this, but it's got to be said that anytime a man would come into the house, I'd be expected to cover up. As a child,
interesting.
Why on earth do I need to cover up?
Yeah.
I'm in my home.
Yeah.
I'd like to wear what I want. it's not like I'm wearing anything crazy, you know, but it was very much just, oh, I need to get a scarf over my chest, or, you know, just need to cover up a little bit. I can't give a full-on hug to my uncle. I've got to give a side hug. As a child, why do I need to know that? Why do I need to do that? And I think over time there has been a lot more education in our culture that, you know, you shouldn't be making girls do that. They're in their home. They'd like to be comfortable. You don't need to send your daughters to another room. It's unfortunate that, you know, we're taught from such a young age that, oh, men are this dangerous thing and they look at you in a sexual way. But it's like, well, if I know that from such a young age, how am I going to be able to maintain healthy relationships with men in the future if I want to have them romantically? So I do think it's a cultural thing.
Yeah. And these messages are really, they come across even if you're not explicit about them. So they were very explicit in your home, but even just, you know, referring to the clothes you're wearing and it can make girls feel very uncomfortable about, well, how are these people looking at me?
Of course.
What about marriage and dating? Because, you know, you talk a lot about how much pressure you came under to get married, and you know how the dating would or wouldn't work. So what can you talk to us about how it's viewed in your culture?
I'm laughing right now because it's not even been 10 minutes, Rachel, and you're already asking me about marriage. Like, give us a break.
Yes because you talk about it on your podcast, and I think it goes with this whole
there was so much pressure. Like, I think the earliest memory I probably have talking about marriage was probably 6 or 7. And it was just a small comment of, oh my gosh, she's so tall. How are we going to get her married? Sorry? Excuse me? Marriage? I'm out here playing with Barbies. Why do I care about marriage? So it was something that was always mentioned very early on. It's common in our culture to have that mentioned from early on because it's just this expectation that you're going to get married one day. It's just something you have to do. And it's not only just the marriage aspect of it, it's marriage is expected as well as a child. There's so much that goes to it. And having to know that from such a young age is not great. You feel like, oh, okay, so as a woman, is my only purpose to just get married and have kids? Like, is that it? But me being me, I guess the black sheep of the family, I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I've got more to live for. Like, I want to go traveling. I want to experience things. I want to have different types of relationships. I want to know who I am. And just the thought of getting married to a man was insane to me. And I thought like that for probably 20, 21 years of my life, where I thought, okay, I'm going to get married at 25, have a kid, and live happily ever after. And now I'm 25, I'm a lesbian, I live by myself, I've just been traveling, and I don't have any plans on getting married. So how does that sit with your family? Because I was going to come on to that. So obviously, again, you're same-sex attracted, which you do mention it in your podcast. I mean, it's really interesting. There's so many really interesting things. But how did you tell your parents? I mean, were they prepared? I think with my parents are not dumb. They like to give this image that, oh, we're parents, that we're superior than you, that we know more than you. But at the end of the day, you're still a human being. They're not thick. They have some level of emotional intelligence, and they know me, and they know how I've always been in terms of, you know, the black sheep and standing my ground. So in terms of it being a shock, I'd say yes and no, because I'd say no because they know what I'm like. Yes, because they were like, I hope it's not true, but it is. And I guess that was the shock factor of it. But I mean, that's all I can say on that, really. But how did you
tell them?
I told my dad first, actually. I had a better relationship with my dad. And now I'd say I have a better relationship with both my parents separately and together. But at the time, I told my dad, I said to him, right, let's go and get coffee. And it just got to the point where I was so sick of hiding this part of me, because I was like, right, we haven't had a good relationship for many years. I'm clearly getting closer with you. I really love and care about you. And just the thought of living this lie whilst maintaining and growing this relationship with you feels wrong. And I just can't hide this massive secret anymore. And I'm so in love with my partner. So, you know, I think parents can see that when their kid's in love. And I just took my dad for a coffee. I was in Stratford, M&S. So beige, I know. So sat him down and I was like, right, I need to tell you something. And I think he actually said it. He was like, are you a lesbian? And I said yes. I think I was more shocked by the fact that my dad knew the word lesbian.
Interesting.
So like,
yes.
You know the word lesbian? What? That means you do know about these things. You're not clueless. That it shows how human you are. And he took it really well, actually, shockingly. But it was only for about 2 weeks. I think he ended up telling my mum. And then obviously my mum was like, no. And obviously they're married. So her input is going to be bigger on him because he's married to her. And I think mentally he can be easily swayed by that, unfortunately. So it was really tough. And now I think my parents are at a point of accepting the fact that, okay, this is what it is. She's going to do what she wants. We can't stop her. And they would rather maintain a good, loving, happy relationship with me regardless.
Interesting.
And I really appreciate that. It's not something that I exclusively bring up to them in terms of, oh, I'm a lesbian and I did this with my girlfriend and blah, blah, blah. Because I just think, what's the point? But at the same time, I appreciate that as brown, desi, ethnic immigrant parents, they were willing to take that information and love me regardless. So I appreciate that.
That must have been quite hard for them because well, I'm interested in how this, there are a couple of things, lots of threads here. And what interests me is how they cope with the culture, because obviously they're living amongst their kindred spirits of people who are from your culture, and they will feel fear and pressure to conform. So having a child that doesn't conform can feel very isolating, or it just, they have to kind of be like, what's wrong with us that we did this, which is not true at all. But that's kind of how parents can feel when their child isn't fitting a cookie cutter ideal. So how do you think your parents navigated that?
Really difficult. I think they still navigate it, if I'm completely honest. And I really like the word that you used, which was conform, because I completely get it. I think, to my surprise, like when I was in India for about 3 weeks and you live in that society and you experience what it's like, and you realize that the only way to be successful or be deemed as successful in India is to get married and have a child, because that's what society over there accepts. So even me being brought up in this generation, being very open-minded, very Western, having lived in that society for 3 weeks in India and feeling like, oh my God, like, is something wrong with me? Why am I not married to a man?
So interesting.
Should I be married to a man? Should I have a child? And that was only in 3 weeks. So I have a lot of respect for them that, they spent such a massive part of their life in a society that expected marriage and kids from them, to then have a child who ended up being gay, then having to unlearn those habits and experiences and pressures and expectations is a lot to deal with. So I give them so much grace when it comes to that.
Yes, and you have actually said that you feel like parents, particularly immigrant parents, don't give themselves enough credit for what they managed to achieve. No. Is it because of what you're just saying now, or are there other things that you think influence that?
There's so much to it. Like I sometimes think about like how difficult it must have been for my parents to come to a country where no one speaks their language, where at the time like racism was very heightened. Having to navigate that is so difficult. I just cannot imagine. I went traveling for 3.5 months across Southeast Asia and I felt so out of place. So I cannot imagine what it felt for my parents when they came to this country trying to make a better life for themselves.
Yes. And not having that support, because a lot of people, a lot of parents say, oh, you know, where's my village? Where's my community? And actually actively not having a support community, you know, your parents probably living in another country, all those things can make it very, you know, and probably not having a very high income either. So you're having to navigate all of these things at the same time as having to, because we grow up ourselves when we parent, you know, we all never really start out understanding what we're supposed to be doing. We slowly learn as we go along. But it was a process. And I think you've explained in some really good detail about how your mental health was affected when you were quite young as a result of feeling like you did, because you called yourself a black sheep, and feeling like you were like that. What can you explain to us what that felt like and why you felt like the black sheep?
I think when God was deciding who he was going to pick out of my entire bloodline to solve it or fix it, he just had to choose me, didn't he? So, they or whatever, God had to just pick me. And I'm like, why me? But at the same time, it was really hard. That's the only thing. It was so hard. It was.
So what helped you?
Sticking to my ground,
I'm interested.
Actually.
Yeah, no, but I'm also interested because were there any techniques or anything that you did? Because I think you've mentioned journaling. There are a lot of parents who've got kids who are struggling with their environment for whatever reason. What sort of things really helped you navigate that, you know, because you didn't really have the backup of your parents at that time? What things helped you?
Okay. So there's two parts of that. In terms of being the black sheep, yes, it was very hard. I always felt very out of place and confused as to, here's this part of me that's super Indian and I love the Indian side of me. And here's this Western side of me that I also love, but I don't know how to put them together. The thing that really helped me was journaling for sure. I used to do a lot of the why exercises. So it's very much like, I'll write down why I'm upset and then ask the question as to why to that answer and keep going why until I kind of
I like that.
Figure it out as best as I can. And that really helped me. But more importantly, on top of that, I actually left home when I was 18 for uni, because at that point I was like, right, if I don't leave, there's no hope for me. I was going to leave under any circumstances. And that was I knew that if I don't leave, it would never get better. I think as children who do feel like the black sheep, very often they feel like, okay, like maybe it will get better. Maybe my parents will get better. But if you don't change your environment, unfortunately, it won't get better because there's no room for change. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I experienced the same thing. I left home at 16 and then had to come back for a while. And as soon as I could get out, I did. Because like you said, I think we're all having to grow. And if you're with people who are finding it hard to grow, then you sort of have to break the mold before things can get better. And why do you think how has your relationship with your parents improved? Because there are lots of parents nowadays, particularly I've seen a lot of stuff in America of parents whose kids have gone no contact and it's devastating. So what do you think?
I think, firstly, in terms of my relationship with my parents being better now, that is something that has taken years and years and years. I mean, it went from me blocking, ghosting, going no contact. You know, there were times where I was being stalked by like relatives, and it was really difficult because I was just like, I want some space to breathe. A child, no matter how old they are, they just want to be loved by their parents.
Absolutely.
So for me to have to take a step back, to heal, do the inner work, I needed the space. The blocking and the ghosting was an essential part of the journey for me to get to where I am now, but also for my parents to get to where they are now, because all I've ever wanted for both of my parents was to be independent, happy, actually put themselves first, because a lot of immigrant parents are in survival mode for their whole lives. And I just wanted them to be happy and live life for themselves as well. So the whole going no contact thing, yes, it's very hard, but I think if it's something that you're going through right now, see it as an opportunity to grow and heal and look inwards. It takes two to tango. And as a human being, we're never perfect. We all make mistakes, and it's very easy to blame someone else and be like, oh, but you did this and you're wrong and blah, blah, blah. It's because of your ego, and the anger is getting in the way. But maybe just taking a step back and thinking, okay, I'm not perfect. Maybe I've done something wrong too. Maybe I need to take some accountability. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I loved about your podcast, and I love about talking to you, is because that you're very rounded. You actually are quite happy to own some of the problems that, you know, your own situation has caused, and how the culture that you come from it's just a really hard fit. It's really hard fit. And one of the things I love, one of your phrases I love, is the chat shit aunties. What's a chat shit? What is it? Tell us what a chat shit auntie is.
A chat shit auntie or an uncle is an auntie who just loves to chat shit about everyone else and everything else apart from herself, but will never take accountability for her own wrongdoings or his wrongdoings. So that is a chat shit auntie or uncle.
Yeah, I think we probably all have experienced those people, and I don't think it's just a Desi thing. I think we have. We have them around the globe, but I'm interested particularly in how that impacted your own upbringing, and because you have them, and I think some of this judgment and some of the blame and the that your parents might have felt would have come from this community of aunties and uncles or whoever who are also kind of imposing what they think should be done. I mean, would that be true, or how's that impacted your family and you?
100%. I just thought of an example right now, and I really want to share that. So I think I was maybe 13 or 14 at the time, and like WhatsApp display pictures were a thing at the time, where like us kids would just always change them every day or whatever. So I must have uploaded a picture of me, I had some sunglasses on and some red lipstick on. And I remember my mum's best friend at the time, she messaged my mum saying, hi, I don't want to be rude, but your daughter looks like a prostitute and I think she should change her DP. Right.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So, you know, for you, obviously it provokes that kind of reaction, which is the standard reaction, because it's sickening to have to hear that as a teenager. But I can now imagine the pressure it must have put on my mum to be like, oh my God, I need to do something about this. And maybe definitely due to a lack of education, emotional intelligence and understanding, her initial response would just be to shout at me, to have a go at me, to tell me that, oh, actually you do look like a prostitute. And I'm, you know, as a 13-year-old, you're going to be like, wait, what? I'm just figuring myself out. I just wanted to wear some red lipstick. Like, what's wrong with this? And I can now look back and understand why it would have provoked that kind of reaction. But it's also an important example because it shows that education is needed, and that is the impact a chat shit auntie can have on parents' generation as well as the children. And it's negative for sure.
And how would have liked your mother to have approached that or dealt with that situation?
I would have appreciated if she told her friend at the time to sod off. What do you mean? She's a child.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly, when you left home, you said automatically everything became your fault. Like when people step out of line, they're the ones who get blamed.
100%. When I left home, the reason why my mum was depressed was my fault. The reason why my dad was depressed was also my fault. The reason why my brother was going off track was my fault. Everything that went downhill was my fault because I left. Even when I left and had the conversation with my family saying that, hey, I'm going to move out on this date, I explained to them that I want to leave because I feel like I have no choice. I'm not leaving because I hate you. I'm not leaving because, you know, I don't like my house or I don't want to live here. I want to be here, but I can't. But they failed to understand that. And I think the only way they could, I guess, validate their feelings was to blame it on me. And I think a lot of people, children, teenagers, young adults who do decide to leave their home in a Desi or South Asian or just, people are kind of general. People who decide to leave their toxic homes tend to get a lot of the blame.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting thing, because I did an episode on charging your child rent, which was brought up by an American woman saying, what should I do? And in some cultures, by the time you hit 18, you're expected to pay rent and you stand on your own 2 feet. And in the Asian cultures, leaving home before you get married, from what I read and understood, is considered to be an offense. Like, they want you at home until
100%.
Yeah.
It's like,
right, so
how dare she be married and not have a child and leave the home? And it just, it kind of like shows this pressure that, how we were talking at the start is, you must get married, have a child by the age of this, at the age of 25 before you can leave. And then you can be in the care of your husband. So then he can take care of you. And it's like, well, where's my autonomy to do anything, And it just kind of makes that pressure stronger from such a young age.
And the shame, and that shame then also ends up affecting your family. Like, they blame the person who left, but also other people. Then it kind of throws a shadow on your family that you didn't manage to hold it together. Very hard.
But the weird thing is, like, this till this earth ends, everyone will keep saying, "Oh, but look at them and look at this and look at their family." But no one will ever take accountability to look in on themselves to see, actually, wait, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my family? Families are difficult in themselves to start with, and that doesn't matter what culture you come from. But to have this added pressure of people or chat shit aunties and uncles saying horrible things about, my family, or saying horrible things about other people, is just unnecessary. It's not needed. Hence why I'm so passionate about what I do, to just educate people that, guys, we're all trying to figure it out. No one has cracked the answer.
100%.
What if we just don't chat shit? What if we just live happy and try figuring it out together?
Or accept, which is what our mantra on this podcast is, accept that everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. And rather than just judging them, we can just support them and assume that they're trying to do better. Because when we assume if people are trying to do better, of course they'll try and rise to it. We hope. And what about community? With your community, one of the great things about you is that you have a lot of gratitude and you do journal gratitude. But in terms of your community, what are the good things? Are there positive things about, because a lot of parents are saying, I want a community, I'm missing a community, where's my community? And I say, if you actually know people who've come from villages and moved, they'll say, I didn't like it because it felt very oppressive and very, judgy. What are the positives, do you think, of having a community like yours?
I think if it wasn't for my friends and community and the people that I love, I don't know where I'd be. I feel like I remember seeing this video on TikTok of this dad, and he was at his son's wedding and he was getting married to a man, so his son was gay. And this Indian dad was saying how, for a long time, I thought there's something wrong with my son, and I don't know, I don't know where I went wrong. But then he educated himself and he was like, right, if out of 100 family members, 50 of them stop talking to me, that means I still have 50 people who still talk to me.
Yes.
So that's a bonus, right?
Love that. Yes.
So he thought, right, if these 50 people who don't want to talk to me anymore because my son is gay, I don't need them. So for me, it kind of made me realize you're allowed to pick and choose your community. Surround yourself with people who love and care about you, who accept you. And through that, I've been able to heal a lot as well. It's not only just through gratitude and journaling that I've been able to move forward. It's through the friends I have who have supported me and loved me for who I am. Yeah,
100%. And you stepped away from your parents to kind of break the mold that you were in. To what extent do you still care what your parents actually think?
A lot. I think no matter how much healing I do, I've come to terms with the fact that when you are raised with so many expectations, it's very difficult to break that mold. It's very difficult to come to terms with the fact that your parents may never be proud of you. That's not true, though, because my parents are proud of me. I know that deep down. They don't say it enough, but I know it. They're obsessed with me. They love me. They just can't seem to get rid of me. And they literally can't. But I think as a brown woman, it's very difficult to break the mold of wanting to fulfill the expectations of your parents. But it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm true to myself, that regardless of what their thoughts or opinions are, I must put myself first. And that's all you can do, really.
Yes, I love your strength of character and how much you know. And that my last thing I want to ask you is, do you think that, because you've just been to India, I've traveled around India too, so I've had a kind of outside view of it. If you had not been born and brought up in England, to what extent do you think you would have been the black sheep of the family and the person who did all of this? Or do you think that's possible in...
That is such a good question. I think about that quite often. I think, honestly, I would never know because I've not lived that life.
No.
But if I, again, was the chosen one to be the black sheep, as you said, I think I still would push the limits of whatever I wanted to do to the maximum capacity, even if I was raised in India, because people think, well, maybe the Western side of the world thinks that India is very backwards. It's not. It's actually far more advanced than it ever has. I had a massive culture shock when I went back after, I want to say 7-8 years, where I saw women, working, wearing mini dresses, out and about. And for me, even saying that out loud, it's like, well, yeah, that's the norm. That's how women should be, as they should be. But for me, it was still a culture shock because going to India during my younger years, it was very much cover up, can't go here, can't do this, can't wear this. So for me to be able to see the progression and how progressive people have actually become made me realize that, okay, even if I was the black sheep in India, if in another life, I think I would still be the Amma that I am today. I would still be a lesbian. There is an LGBT community in India. People are so much more open to learn. And this is including like my family that live in the village. Like they are genuinely interested in my life and they are always, asking questions and they're curious. So I think if I was a black sheep in India, I would still be the Amma that I am today.
Which is wonderful to hear. And finally, just for any parents who are listening, who I know I've got a lot of parents who are living outside of their original culture, who will be struggling with some of these things. What would be your advice? Sure.
I wrote an answer to this because I really had to think about it. So I want to read it out.
Please do.
I wrote, for any advice to parents, I would say, number one, to actually talk to your children. Not just mundane conversations as to how's the weather, how are you? No, have genuine, deep conversations with your children. Find out how they're truly feeling if something's going on that you're not aware about. So I would say number one, communication. Number two, I want to remind parents that you should be your child's best friend. Your kids are not meant to fear you. You might be a parent, but you're also a human being that has experienced life, who has had ups and downs, and children are incredibly intelligent and they can pick up on that. So the more open you are, the easier it is for your child to feel safe around you and understand that you are as human as they are. Having spent so many years fearing my parents, I didn't have anyone to go to and I got mixed in with the wrong crowd. I was groomed from ages 16 to 21. I left home. I had to grow up quickly. But if my parents were educated or had a better understanding of me or made me feel safe in their environment, maybe things would have been a lot more different. Despite saying that, I wouldn't change my experiences because I've ended up ending a lot of generational trauma. So I'm proud of where I am today. So that is my message to parents.
You should be proud. That's amazing. What amazing message. It actually made me feel a bit tearful. Yeah. Beautiful message. Amma, thank you so much for joining us. And I will put the link to your podcast in the show notes because I'm sure there'll be parents who want to check it out. Are there other ways that people can find you?
My Instagram, TikTok. I'm on all social media. If you go into my Instagram, in the bio, there's links to all my channels and social media channels. I'm on YouTube. I have a podcast. It's video, audio, all the above. So check it out. Have a browse through. Learn something. Maybe you can relate. Yes. Drop me a DM if you guys want to know anything more. So yeah, I really appreciate it, Rachel. Like I just want to add as well. Rachel was one of the most loveliest people I've met when I was at the show last year. The energy that she had, like, I was just like, oh my God, a mum is talking to me and she is so cool and she wants me to be on her podcast. Yes, I love that. And I'm so proud of what you do as well. And I thank you for putting out the content that you do because it's so important for parents to know that us kids, we actually want a good relationship with our parents and we love them for who they are. So thank you.
And it never
Thank
stops.
You so much.
You never stop needing and wanting your parents' love and approval. Never stops. That was Amma Browngirl. You can find her on all social media and there's a link in the podcast notes to her podcast. It's funny, I used to tell my kids, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent. But as they grew into teenagers, I realised that it's more subtle than that. My job is definitely to set clear boundaries for them in which they can safely learn about the world. But I've also got to be prepared to discuss why those boundaries are there and the way that they're being enforced. And at times when they've had friendship difficulties, I have definitely stepped in to play the role of friend. Now my daughter's 18, I can honestly say that the relationship feels like a friendship. And there's still a very strong undercurrent of parent, which will always be there. I'm still putting time limits on her phone, which she agrees with, and still being consistently available to support and cheer her on in a way that's far more stable than a friendship. If you found this episode useful, then please share it now with at least one other person. Give it 5 stars if you feel like it, or even write a review. I love hearing your suggestions and feedback, so please ping an email anytime at teenagersuntangled@gmail.com. A big hug from me. Have a great week.